Oh man, this is the whole Trump interview? Oh God. And they even titled it Trump sounds off on Zelensky. Are you kidding me? Really? Look, okay, I had this like little tinge of hope yesterday, a tiny tinge of hope, but I was gonna like make a tweet about why we shouldn't be too hopeful about it, and it had to do with the New York Post cover. I don't know if you guys saw the New York Post cover, but I think that some people in right-wing media, some people in right-wing space are seeing, like, I don't know, like Elon Musk, like pumping Alexander Dugin's talking points out into the public, and they're like, oh, maybe maybe there's a problem here. And so what the New York Post did is they decided that they were going to make a cover photo that was against Putin, that was blatantly anti-Putinist, and then made some talking points that were in favor of Ukraine. And it's, its headliner, it has a Ukraine banner, in fact, like a Ukrainian flag at the top here. You can see today's cover, Mr. Putin, Mr. President, Putin is the dictator, and 9 other Ukraine-Russia war truths we ignore at our peril. This was after Trump said that Zelensky was a dictator, because elections are suspended as long as martial law is declared, as long as the Russians invading Ukraine, and then elections will be hosted afterwards. And so he's emphasizing that Zelensky's the dictator. And when asked today whether or not Putin was the dictator, he dodged the question. I don't know if you guys saw that, but he was asked whether Putin was the dictator today, and he dodged it after yesterday declaring that Zelensky was a dictator. So he can declare that the democratically elected leader is a dictator, but he cannot declare that the person who throws his political opponents out of windows and does not allow people to directly criticize him, even people like Igor Girkin, hardcore Russian nationalists, to criticize him without throwing them in prison cells where they'll get tortured. So we're just gonna say that this is all the same. One was democratically elected. One had people monitor their elections and declare them to be illegitimate. The other, and is still supported by, the majority of his people, that open pollsters, where you, in a country where you can't criticize Zelensky. I've been in Ukraine. I've criticized Zelensky before. I've called Zelensky. I said Zelensky was stupid here. He has a corrupt guy here. He needs to get rid of this guy. People don't like this advisor. He needs to make this tough decision. He's not doing it for political reasons. I think he's scared of Zelensky's popularity. I think that, people go out there, like, he's not making decisions on mobilization that he needed to do for political purposes. There's the new brigades that were made for political purposes, and the 155th probably should have just had all that personnel just diverted into old units. That was a terrible decision, and it ended up with a disaster outside of Pokrovsk. I can openly say this is the fault of not only military leadership, which is what you can allow to say in Russia. I could say it's also Zelensky's fault, because Zelensky has to greenlight this stuff, and while he'll listen a lot to his military leadership, he is the person who messages to the West, and he will, I think, sometimes make decisions based on that messaging, because war is an extension of politics. Clausewitz said it; it's well known, and he understands this. But sometimes it ends in bad ways. That doesn't mean he's necessarily the worst person for the job. That doesn't mean that anybody else who could have been in that job at the time, like Poroshenko, would have done a better job. He has certain skills, but I can openly criticize this. You can't do that in Russia. And so there's not only is there a false equivalence being declared, but now Trump seems afraid to call Putin a dictator, as he's conceding to him on troop deployments, he's conceding to him on NATO, he's conceding to him on territory, conceding to him on Ukrainians being at the negotiating table, conceding to him on overriding Ukrainian martial law. And so I was hoping that, now there's going to be some pushback, and there seems to be some. But Trump continues to go off on the deep end, seems to be negotiating against Zelensky. And the most recent thing he said at a press conference that scared me, that I'm not very happy with, is this right here, which is leading me to put it today's title, which is Trump negotiating against Ukraine. When you say stuff like this, you are undermining the Ukrainian position, you are strengthening the Russian position, and you're making it more difficult for the Ukrainians to assert themselves in negotiations, or for them to use leverage, even if they have legitimate leverage, which they do have. An example in Kursk, or an example in the fact that, there still is members of the population that can be mobilized and the Ukrainian population is not willing to concede. Only 1%, like, or very small percentage of the population is willing to concede to all of Russia's terms. So when you make it easier for Russia to get all their terms, you're not only making it worse for the Ukrainians, you're also making it much harder to get a peace deal, because there is a point where the Ukrainians will just say no. And I think Trump needs to realize this isn't a real estate deal. This is, you're supposed to be supporting your allies to get the best deal possible, because the majority of Americans support Ukraine. Majority of Americans think their fight was righteous. It supports most analysts believe it support our strategic interests. Now you say, what is that based in? Mostly deterrence, right? This isn't a price taggable item, so it makes it very hard for you to go to somebody maybe on an alt media podcast and say, deterrence, how we would measure deterrence. It's, you'd have to talk to IR professionals. Maybe this isn't like as advertisable on the campaign trail, but these are important things, but it's not price taggable. It's not valuable to Trump. And so it leads to him undermining the Ukrainian position, because he's not a diplomatic expert. He is a New York socialite businessman, and not all those skills of the reality TV star necessarily translate over to the international diplomatic sphere. And that's why he's saying stuff like this.
Well, I see pictures that you fortunately don't get to see. You don't want to see them. And that is a killing field. You have young soldiers being killed, thousands a week, and we got to get it over with. It's bad for Russia, and it's bad for Ukraine, and it's bad for us on a humanitarian basis. I've had very good talks with Putin, and I've had not such good talks with Ukraine. They don't have any cards, but they play it tough. But we're not going to let this continue. This war is terrible. It would have never happened if I were president, but it did happen, so I got stuck with it, and the whole world is stuck with it. And right now you have a country that has its cities, they look like demolition sites. Those beautiful towers, those 1,000-year-old golden domes that were so beautiful, the most beautiful in the world, they say, they're all in smithereens. Well, I see pictures that you...
Okay, so first off, I see pictures that you can't see. Killing fields. Shut up. That's not true, okay? You see everything he sees, okay? Welcome to the 21st century. It's not all just like spycraft and like secret intel reports. Everybody has cell phones. And so I know that there's a bunch of dead bodies out there because the babushka can take out her phone and record it. The soldiers themselves upload their bases coordinates by accident on Twitter, and then they get storm shadowed, right? This is all happening on social media in real time, being mapped. This has been the case since the start of the Syrian civil war, when I was in middle school following the live map updates of the fight against ISIS as the SDF were fighting in Raqqa or like middle to early high, like in this time period. This has been the case for like well over a decade. So the idea that he has access to some secret images of violence and carnage, everybody sees what's happening out of Gaza. It is like, oh, I've seen, where is this type of like description of the bombing of Gaza like this? Oh, I see the carnage that he does. No, it doesn't serve a political purpose in that case. It serves a political purpose here. So he pretends to have some knowledge of some deep, dark images that no one else does, in order to scare the public. Look, there's horrific images out of Ukraine. You can go see them. They're freely available. He might be able to access some certain intelligence photos from certain spies, but I don't believe them to be any more horrific than the targeting of babushkas in the human safari in Kherson that we see, or the castrating of Ukrainian POWs, or any of the other horrific videos that have come out of the war so far. So this is just kind of fear-mongering with the unknown, and I don't like it. It's just like how he lies about death numbers, lies about aid numbers to Ukraine, lies about, Zelensky sleeping while the American Treasury Secretary Bassett was visiting, even though there's pictures of them having the meeting. He lies about, how the war started. He just lies like constantly about it. He doesn't feel an inclination to stop because he hasn't faced any consequences. He was elected based off those lies, so he's going to continue to do this and now misinform the American public based upon this. And so just vague fear about these unknown images. Then he goes into this idea of, I had good talks with the Russians. I've had not such good talks with the Ukrainians. The Ukrainians are negotiating as if they have all these cards. They're playing it tough. Now, this is the difficult thing for Donald Trump, right? Is the Ukrainians do have cards, right? And like putting aside like the basic card of they are a negotiating party that you don't even currently have at the negotiating table. And if you make a deal presented to them and they just say no, like Zelensky just did with the American mineral deal, and the American response to it was basically the equivalent, from what I can see in public, from Donald Trump's national security advisor, of shut up and take the deal. That's what he said on Fox News. He said they need to quiet down and take the deal. Shut up and take the deal. That's the diplomatic skill with which our allies are being treated with. What is Putin being treated with? No American troop deployments in Ukraine, promised before negotiation has started. Same, NATO membership, we're taking that off the table. Oh, maybe it's back on the table, but since we already gave it out, everybody kind of already knows. Same with territorial concessions, pre-2014, we're kind of going to take that off the table beforehand. We're not even going to attempt to put that on the table with the critiques that America's got. They did that with NATO membership, didn't do that with territory. No, taking it all off the table for no concessions in return. Nothing on Ukrainian children being returned. Nothing on, protections for civilians in Kherson who are being hunted, or just civilians generally anywhere that are being hunted. Just like nothing in return. They're spending more effort trying to strong arm the Ukrainians out of their natural resources than they are trying to strengthen their position. They're undermining their position by saying they don't have any cards. Ukrainians, you have to get them to the table. That's a card. You have to make them agree to it. If you say, we are just going to stop sending aid to Ukraine, they didn't want to take peace, I'm done with this, that's not going to be liked by the American public, okay? He might be able to, feed his ego. There might be members of the MAGA base that are going to go up and go, yeah, woohoo! I don't care that all these cities are going to fall. I don't care the Pokrovsk, or Dobropila, or Konstantinivka, or Kramatorsk, or all these places where people have homes and communities. They're just going to have to pick up and lose their homes because you've never felt the pain of losing your home. You've never felt the pain of losing everything you've owned. You've never felt the pain of being told you cannot, if you want to stay in your home, you cannot criticize the government. You're no longer going to have elections. You're never going to be able to have a functioning civil society. You're not going to be able to speak your mother tongue. You're not going to be able to, sing songs of your native language. It's going to make it much more difficult to, go visit your family on the other side of the now DMZ in the mid, near 20, dividing 20 to 25% of who knows how much of Ukraine. If Trump is undermining the Ukrainian position, he's undermining the Ukrainian position. He's pretending they don't have any cards. Outside of the fact that the Ukrainians, just their population will not accept a deal where they concede to everything. There's polling data on this, right? The Ukrainians, and this is the thing, Trump actually does have a way to be liked by the Ukrainians to some amount by talking about negotiating with the Russians, because the majority of Ukrainians do want to negotiate with the Russians. Just look at this poll. What's the problem? Read it. Come on, read it, chat. What's the problem? You can start here. There's all the numbers. Hop to it. Oh, okay. You don't, not all of you speak Ukrainian. Understood. Here is the poll. Okay. For the few of you who have not, gone to the Azov Ukrainian training schools, deep and, under the deserts of Ukraine, in the secret bunkers. This poll has a lot of interesting information. It has the most popular foreign leaders in Ukraine are Emmanuel Macron, Duda, the Polish prime minister, van der Leyen, the president of the EU Commission. Then you have Olaf Scholz at 57%. I'm surprised by that number. I thought it'd be lower. Erdogan, 57. We just released a video on the second channel about the Kiev-Ankara axis. That might explain it. They have been reaffirming Ukraine's territorial integrity. 56% Keir Starmer. He, while not as popular as, say, Boris Johnson, who's kind of a weird, almost cult figure in Ukraine now because of how supportive of Ukraine he was, he is still supportive of Ukraine, 56%. Least popular is Orban, 11%, Lukashenko, 8%, and Putin, of course, at 1%. Now, if you go to Ukrainian public figures, Trump says that Zelensky has a 4% approval rating. 65% approval. 65% approval. Now, there's other polls that have him at 57. But even those polls that have him at 57, that they're Elon's disputing because they took U.S. aid money at one point, which, how about you challenge the methodology instead of the fact they got a government grant? Is that the fact? If, them getting a government grant discounts their work, then a lot of Tesla's work has been discounted. A lot of SpaceX's work has been discounted because you get billions of dollars in government grants every year, and now you're getting the information on your competitors who also get government grants. So just challenge the methodology, okay? But he doesn't know anything about polling. He's not an expert in polling, and so Elon Musk, Trump, all of them comment on polling as if it's as if they're experts, because they just want people to know that they're winning. Anyway, you can see.
Dylan, hope you're doing okay. From what I am aware, pro-Russian sentiment in East Ukraine has been dead since 2014. Would you say this is accurate?
Generally speaking, I mean, there's of course, there's holdouts in the territory that is held by Russia, obviously, but I mean, occupied Donetsk did not bring about the success that was promised economically and, of the future. It did not bring about the promised golden age of the Ruski Mir that was talked about. And all of the young working people got out, and the ones that didn't have been put into LNR DPR militias, and they were brutalized at the start of the war. You remember the guys in Russia with the Mosin Nagats? You want to know the sad truth of the matter? A lot of those guys, if not a majority of those pictures, were Ukrainians, many of whom, maybe even a majority of whom, who were forced into service to fight against their country illegally against international law, given the shittiest of shit weapons, and then used basically like cannon fodder. And many commanders even treated them that way specifically because they saw them as like, oh, well, they're the Ukrainians, so, they're not really Russian. And it's honestly really sad when you think about it. There was a lot of like horrific atrocities like that during, World War II, for example, which is why it was against international law. Because the forceful foresight of brother to fight against brother in a country is awful, immoral, which is why the Russians do it at every opportunity. Anyway, putting that aside, the data I wanted to talk about that made this important for the conversation we're having is, look at this. 91% oppose U.S.-Russia talks on Ukraine without Ukraine. The talks that are happening right now between Russia and the United States, if they come to a decision and then present it to Ukraine, 91% of the Ukrainian public is already, from the get-go, opposed to this. That's not a good way. It's not good to start with 91% of Ukrainians already opposed to your plan. Or not even your plan, but the way you're going about bringing about your plan. If you're interested in why, there's two main reasons. The first reason is a issue of policy. There are thousands of Ukrainian children that are still kidnapped in Russia. And, historically, after World War II, a lot of the Polish children that were kidnapped by the Germans or kidnapped by most of them didn't get to go home. Most of them didn't end up home. They're just gone somewhere forever.
I'm a disabled veteran and don't have much. Sending what I can. Also new to your channel.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate the tenor. Thank you. I appreciate that. And don't ever feel like you need to donate beyond your means. That $10, I know it means a lot. So thank you. But I mean, most of those children didn't get to go home because their identities were erased or they died in some subsequent tragedy. And a lot of these Ukrainian families who want to have their children back, or these orphanages that had their children stolen from them and just given to Russian families and their cultural identities erased, many of these children want to go home and are being denied going home. And many of these families have no clue where they're going. And is this a priority for Trump? It's a priority for Ukrainians. Is it a priority for Trump? Is it a priority for J.D. Vance? Is it a priority maybe for Keith Kellogg? But Keith Kellogg was not the person who was in Saudi Arabia. Keith Kellogg is the envoy to Ukraine. In Russia, he's supposed to be the peace envoy, but he's not the one at seemingly in these crucial meetings. It's Marco Rubio, it's others. So there's a fear that certain things like that, the return of POWs, and other issues that are of great importance to the Ukrainians will just be completely left out. Or, for example, very, very big key issues like security guarantees, which, for example, if you look at the end of this poll, 83% believe Ukraine can only agree to an armistice if security guarantees are provided. Basically, they believe Ukraine should not accept any agreement that does not guarantee that they're not going to get invaded again. So, i.e., hey, we're going to end the war, and in response, we're going to have like 30,000 European troops stationed. That's not a strong enough security guarantee. You need unilateral security agreements or multilateral security agreements or even NATO membership that would properly make the Russians think this is too much of a security risk for us to invade. And so 83% of Americans, of Ukrainians, can only agree to an armistice if those security guarantees are provided, which have not been outlined by Trump in any manner so far. This is where I got that 1% believe Ukraine must accept of all of Russia's terms. So when I said 1%, I wasn't getting that out of anywhere. It's literally 1%. Now 81% do, 64% though support talks with Russia. 81% believe the best way to achieve peace is to reach a compromise solution via talks involving a third-party nation. So therefore, like Turkey, for example, being a host for Ukraine and Russia, and maybe Ukraine would be backed up by the United States, maybe Russia would be backed up by Lukashenko or Kim Jong-un, who knows, right? That would be a framework which the Ukrainians would support. And that seems reasonable, right? That's how you got peace. That's how you got settlements in Oman for many, many conflicts. Oman would host two different sides that would come, either in secret or publicly, negotiate through Oman serving as a third party. The Sultan of Oman was very famous for this. And then they would come to a peace settlement. And this was, it's a common framework. It makes sense the Ukrainians would support this framework. This would be a framework where they could voice their concerns and be able to know when to, take a deal or walk away if the deal is something like give us all your land, no security guarantees, limits on your troops here, and, etc. But with them not at the table, Trump can make a deal, offer to the Ukrainians. Ukrainians can say this is ridiculous, and then they can say, "Oh, you could have taken the deal. Let's cut life support." And that's the big fear I have. But my main point to show all of this, is Ukrainians are willing under certain conditions not only to accept peace because they do want peace, they do want their sons and daughters to stop dying. Because as much as they desire freedom, they also desire to keep their children, and their husbands. And in many instances, their fathers. This is generational war on both sides. The average age of Russian soldiers signing contracts at the end of 2024 was 50 years old. Both sides are post-Soviet birth collapse has affected the demographics of both militaries extremely. But even though they're also willing to accept peace under certain conditions, they're also willing to walk away from the table and keep fighting under certain conditions. So Trump needs to be careful, because if he completely screws the pooch and offers a bad deal, he has the risk of having an Afghanistan scenario. America withdraws its support, and maybe, it doesn't have the immediate impact we saw with Afghanistan, but the majority of the American public support Ukraine. The majority of the American public want to see a cessation of the war, but the majority of the American public also wanted to see a withdrawal from Afghanistan. But they didn't want to see a withdrawal from Afghanistan where troops died. They didn't want to see a withdrawal from Afghanistan that looked like that. That reminded them of Vietnam. The American public wants to see peace in Ukraine. The American public does not want to see the submission of Ukraine. They do not want to see Ukraine get screwed. So this puts Trump in a difficult position that I don't even know if he fully realizes he is in, as he thinks the Ukrainians retain no cards. So there's also this big point here that they actually do retain cards militarily. Their long-range drone program has been successful in crippling Russian oil industry. They have crippled the Russian Black Sea Fleet. They have destroyed roughly 50 to 60% of Russia's old Soviet stockpiles and destroyed much of their professional army that they had before the war. They have inflicted economic damage to the Russians, both through just the amount they've had to contribute to the war, which has affected other parts of society, but also through their drone campaign, which has been previously mentioned, and the sanctions packages from Europeans and the United States, which, if removed, could be some of the biggest help Russia could get from Donald Trump, which is one of the big concerns that I have. But these are all cards. You remove more cards from them when you don't act in tandem with them, undermining your position like Trump is doing. But these are all cards. They have cards. There's other parts of the population they could mobilize. They don't want to, but that is a card. A painful one, but one they still retain.
Good. It's always nice. We won all 7 swing states in addition, and we got the popular vote by millions of votes. But now I have much higher poll numbers than even the election, so I've never had such wonderful numbers. People have always said, well, I don't know, is he doing good or don't we know or whatever, but I guess people did feel we did a great job in term 1, and that's how we won. But right now I just got them the best poll numbers I've ever had, beating everybody. So that's nice. That's always
Right.
nice,
Who?
Brian.
I know.
Who?
You always like to keep score. Mr. President, the one thing that you
There's no
inherited,
election.
and that is Hamas. Since October 7th, they've been at war, and the IDF has been at war with Hamas.
Wait,
Yesterday,
he
we got
inherited Hamas.
4 hostages.
Dog, just shut it down, dude. You're gonna end this a year ago. God
back
damn.
in caskets, 2 of which were children, 9 months and 4 years old. And the mom that they gave back was not even the right body. As we wait for 6 more hostages to be returned on Saturday, what do you think should happen with Benjamin Netanyahu, the IDF, and Hamas?
Well, I speak to him, and he's certainly he's actually not torn.
Question is,
you
what
know
should
where he
happen?
stands, and he would like to go in. He just is so angry, and he should be. If he's not angry, then there'd be something wrong with him, frankly. He is very angry. He's a very angry man at what
Okay, why can't that language be used towards Zelensky? Like,
happened, especially what
Netanyahu
happened.
loses 1,200 people, and a year and a half later, he has a right to be angry. Ukraine loses 20% of their country, and like over 100,000, hundreds of thousands possibly, and like all these people to torture, child kidnapping. Oh, they need to quiet down, is what the National Security Advisor said.
Occurred is occurred.
Yesterday with these kids.
Long-time listener Dylan, will you be going back to Ukraine? And if so, do you
Yes.
have a P.O. box for stuff
No.
to send for you and soldiers?
I don't, but I'll think about it. Send me an email, DylanBurnsTV@gmail.com, if you have a genuine interest in it. If there's enough interest, maybe I'll do something.
These were babies, and it's rough stuff. It's rough stuff, and it looked like they were celebrating as they were bringing the bodies back. And it's the scene is not even believable, Brian. When you see what's happening, it's sort of not even
Occurred is
believable.
occurred.
It's so
Is the
barbaric.
king sick?
You wouldn't
Does
think that could
Donald
happen.
Duck have bird flu or something? Lol.
Thanks for the fiver. What? So much time spent to like describe the brutality.
A modern age.
One day, and I'm not saying it wasn't horrible. It was horrible, but where's any of this directed towards the largest war in Europe since World War II?
But it happened.
You dropped off 2,000-pound bombs to them that they had ordered a while ago. You said basically you're not going to tell them not to go into any province. What Joe Biden was saying, don't go into Rafah. You better stop. Humanitarian aid here, threatening with sanctions. You have a different approach. It's Prime Minister, do what you have to do. So he's got the decision to make.
Wait,
Do
wait,
I
you didn't
worry
answer
about
the question. What are we
30+
going to
hostages
do?
that may still
You just
be
said he's
alive?
angry.
Or do I finish off a terror
Wait.
organization
The
that's trying to
question,
destroy
the question
you?
was,
Are you-
what should we do? And his answer was not Netanyahu. I don't know. Netanyahu angry. Like that's not okay.
You okay either way?
I am. I really am. When you see what's happening here, it's a hard thing to say. You just wonder the condition of the hostages that they have. One group came in so bad, looked like it was concentration camp in Germany. This was a terrible, terrible thing when I looked. And then the other day, a group came in which was not as bad, actually not really close.
Okay. So for this war, you can use words like concentration camp, Nazi Germany. Over in reference to Putin, won't even call him a dictator. Can't even like muster the courage to call him a dictator today after calling Zelensky one yesterday.
Closely as bad. But I think really a lot of the people they have are in such bad shape. They're so violent and vicious. I think a lot of people, if you look, I think they're in really bad shape.
Right.
I really do. I think they're trying to give the best ones first. And if the best ones are the ones I'm seeing, they're in really bad shape. And sometimes you have to make a decision. It's a decision that has to be made. It's a rough decision. But the scene yesterday was really terrible because you're talking about babies.
But
who
Mr. President,
would
there's
do
no
this?
scenario where there's a two-state solution.
This is really a low level.
There's no scenario where there's a two-state solution anymore. I know Mike Waltz, your national security advisor, says there's no way Hamas is in charge there. So this seems it seems like we're the ultimate impasse. Your idea of taking over Gaza, making it more international, wasn't necessarily well received by Jordan or Egypt. So what's next,
That's all you have to say. Everybody else, people didn't like you say, let's just delete Gaza. What's the next idea? That's it? No follow-up on was that a good idea really, sir? Was to just say, let's take all these people and move them away forever?
Well, we pay Jordan
Thank
and
you,
Egypt
Fox.
billions
Brian.
of dollars a year, and I was a little surprised they'd say that, but they did. And I'll tell you,
Why
the
would
way
you be
to do it is
surprised?
my plan. I think that's the plan that really works,
Gotcha.
but I'm not forcing it. I'm just going to sit back and recommend it, and then the U.S. would own the site. It'd be no Hamas, and it'd be development, and you start all over again with a clean plate.
Right.
Another way of doing it, but I don't think it would work, would be to do it with people there. But I just don't see that working. I mean, it's been
Maybe
so many
in order
years,
to
so
get
many
aid to
decades.
Ukraine, we need to tell him that he can own like half of Luhansk or something. I don't like. Is that the only way?
Of killing on that site. That is one dangerous place, and
Right.
Hamas would be there, I guess, depending on what happens over the next little while. But the question is,
Right.
can you wipe them all out? You know, they're so interspersed among people, and it's certainly not an easy thing to do. But
Right.
See how casually this is treated by Fox? Their normalization of this is complicity. Not only complicity, it is encouragement and it is facilitation.
like my plan,
It's supposed to be
I thought my plan
This
was
is
to get
supposedly
them out,
supposed
you
to
move
be a
them.
journalist right here, Brian Kilmeade. He would call himself a journalist and a host of a show where people are supposed to learn things.
You build a beautiful community and a permanent community, and you then take the site, the Gaza Strip. You take Gaza, and it's really essentially leveled now. You
There's
don't
a
have too much
community
to do
there
other
now.
than, remove debris.
All the
It's really-
people?
that place is not
Anything to do but
livable.
remove all the
And
people?
if you gave the people a choice between that and living in a nice community, I think I know where they'd go. But we'll.
By the
we'll
way,
see what
for the
happens. I
record,
thought it
these
was-
refugee camps outside of Gaza never end up being this like refugee camps in like Syria, etc. These never end up being like fantastic communities. High rates of poverty, malnutrition, issues with radicalization. Like there's all sorts of issues.
I thought it was
Right.
great because the location is, it's a great location. I don't know why Israel ever gave that up. Why did they give it up? I
Yeah.
guess they look at us and say, why did you?
The new Trump position isn't not only that maybe we should take over Gaza, it's Israel should have always held and kept Gaza. It should have never been Palestinian in the first place. That's his new position. Wow. My God. How could he look even how could someone have a soul, be born as a human being, and look those people in Dearborn, Michigan in the face and then say that whatever? I mean it's
Give up
Trump.
the
What am I
Panama
saying?
Canal, Brian, right?
I mean, snake oil salesman's in the next town by the time you realize you're not getting your hair back.
It's all
I don't
connected.
know.
Ariel
I
Sharon
can't
decided
believe
to
it.
do
You
that.
look down on a map, they have the whole ocean. And somebody from Israel, I guess, I can tell you who, but
Right.
it was well known, but he decided to give it up.
Yeah.
It's one of the bad real estate deals. I see a lot of bad real estate
So-
deals. That's one of them right there.
So I'm going to have more about Ukraine. We have so much more to talk about the economy. We'll have that straight ahead. President saying whatever BB wants, he should go do. He's got the 2,000-pound bombs, and you have the horrible situation with the slow let go of all the hostages. You listen to the Brian Kilmeade Show. My interview with President Trump, exclusive.
Do
to
whatever
us,
you
for
want,
this hour. Don't
Netanyahu.
move. Now we talked about.
Remember when everybody was saying at the start, oh my God, see, he's brought peace. Trump is the peace. He pressured the peace situation. Yeah, hoo ha. None of those people are gonna backtrack that. By the way, they're just gonna keep on moving like nothing happened.
Hamas and the whole horrific.
I mean, what did anybody expect? I mean, look at his backers. Look who finances his campaign. Look at the people he surrounds himself. Look at who he appointed. I mean, Mike Huckabee for Israel ambassador should have been the death nail. I mean, a long time ago should have been the death nail. But if you were somehow deluded into thinking maybe there's still a possibility, once the guy who doesn't believe there is a thing as a Palestinian was picked to be ambassador to Israel, you should have long ago realized you were cooked.
Situation with the hostages and what he would do, and essentially Bibi's got a green light. Now I talk about the number one story in the world, and that's Ukraine, the president's view, and you'll be interested to hear what he really thinks happened to start this war. Watch. President, cover of every newspaper just about is your stance in Ukraine. I was looking up, I almost found no indications that you said anything bad about Zelensky up until the last few days.
Oh my
And it
God.
seems as though when he didn't.
Well, that's not true. He called him like a salesman, and you might say that's, oh no, that's nice. That's fine. The way he was saying is that he's basically taking our money for no good reason, and we're getting nothing out of it. Even though, because he doesn't understand things like deterrence as valuable for the United States. It's not something you can stick a price tag on, so it's hard for him to find value in it.
The mineral deal, and was critical of you for having a delegation talk in Saudi Arabia with Russia. That was a turning point for you, correct?
I've been watching this man for years now, as his cities get demolished, as his people get killed, as his soldiers get decimated, where you have old men and young men. You have men that are too old to fight,
Right.
men that are too young to fight.
What the fuck does he mean men are too young to fight? Is he suggesting it? That makes it sound like they have child soldiers, man. What, 18? They have 18-year-olds. You have to be 18 to fight in the Ukrainian armed forces. Same thing in the United States. We raise our recruitment age to 21. Is that what we're gonna do? Because that's how it would work. If we got invaded, we'd have 18-year-olds dying on the front.
I've been watching this.
Too young to. What does that mean? Like, every man is too young to die. I mean, in this war, wars are bad, but like 18. What is that? Oh yes. And again, people don't know that are watching this. They don't know anything about Ukraine. They don't know if that's true or not. Like 14-year-olds just it's like that scene in maybe they think it's like that scene in Jojo Rabbit. What? 1 second. Let me find it quick. What? Oh, got it. Like this right here. This scene right here. This is exactly this is the image.
And it's a war that shouldn't have started.
Donald Trump is kind of low-key projecting right now.
Come here. Okay, see that American there? Just go give him a hug. Go, run, let's go!
That's Zelensky on the front. You know, he does his frontline visits. That's what he does when the camera's not on. It's silly, man. He's the president. His words like carry weight. He's actively ruined our reputation with the Canadian population for nothing. Like
Had it.
his
it
words
didn't
like
stop.
carry weight.
Would have never started. If I won the election, which I did, it's a war that never,
Right.
ever would have started. So I've been watching for years, and I've been watching him negotiate with no cards. He has no cards. And you get sick of it. You just get sick of it. And I've had it. And
I've had
he
it.
then made a deal
Sick
with
of
us
what?
for
They're the one
rare
getting
earth.
invaded and attacked, man. Like, oh, you get sick of it. What do you mean you get sick of it? What is Trump? Oh, poor Trump. He's the real victim of all of this.
And things. And who knows what rare earth is worth, but at least it's something. And who knows what it's worth. Who
At
knows what they're
least
even-
$500 billion or something. That's what he wanted. $500 billion. Mind you, $500 billion is over three times the size of Ukraine's GDP. And I think about over four times the size of what we've actually sent Ukraine in aid. About $110 billion. Because a lot of it was just like funds for American factories that are no longer going to be sending Ukraine shells. So I guess that's aid for American weapon manufacturers, not aid for Ukraine. It was only aid for Ukraine if that ended up leading to more shells getting built, sent over. But if we build up the factory and then cut off the shells, how do we count that as aid for Ukraine? But that's what we said in the bill. We counted that as aid for Ukraine, just like the replenishment of U.S. stocks. It'll just make up a new number next week. This week it's $350 billion to Ukraine. Next week he'll say we sent $450 billion. It'll just make up a new number.
But we made a deal with rare earth, and Secretary of Treasury, a very good guy, actually went there, and they couldn't even come close to getting a deal done. And frankly, I wish he didn't go there, waste all of his time like that. But they couldn't get close.
What he said yesterday was that Bessent was actually that Bessent went, the Treasury Secretary, and tried to meet with Zelensky, but Zelensky was asleep, which was countered by the Ukrainians when they posted a picture of Zelensky and Bessent having their meeting, which was publicly available before. I guess Trump just didn't see it, and so now this is the new thing. They just didn't come close to making a deal. I guess now he asked actually how the meeting went.
They met,
Right.
and then when he wanted to get it closed, he was unable to meet him again. But so just a wasted trip.
I mean, imagine a country says, give up your nukes, we'll protect you if something happens. They say K. Then you get attacked. They do nothing for half a decade. Then you get attacked again. They say, fine, we'll do something. Here's some weapons. Then you say, okay. And then they upcharge the weapons 4 times over afterwards and say, you got to give us money for those weapons we never said you were going to have to give us money for. Good old American diplomacy. A reputation through the roof. America stocks. Invest now.
Because, he's a good man. I didn't want him to put himself under danger because I had a feeling something like that would happen. But look what you have. You have a man who's led a country that had the most beautiful cities that they demolished, had the most beautiful domes. Those domes are the most beautiful
But it's
in the
all
world.
Russia's. But that's Russia's fault, though, Mr. President. Russia
They're
did
all
the
demolished. 1,000-year-old domes.
Fox has tried so hard to salvage this. Could you imagine? Like, the cartels go into, like, Texas, like, shoot up a bunch of stuff, and then, like, well, like, God, Trump, you did this. You didn't make a deal with the cartel. Like, that's the problem. Like, and he has to interfere here. Just, like, Brian Kilmeade has to do some type of salvaging. Like, oh, they blew it up, right? They were the ones who invaded. But it's too late. It's too late. You should have done this 2 years ago. 2 years ago, you needed to stamp this fire out. It's already deep in the party. You might be able to treat the wound a little, but now you have to live with the gangrene. You gotta chop something off or something. It's not just a tiny infection anymore. Okay, it's in the blood. You're gonna slip into sepsis, okay, if you do nothing, but you're still gonna have to chop off a finger or two.
And everything's demolished. I mean, it's like a demolition site, though. It's sort of like Gaza. In fact, it's more, at least Gaza has a couple of buildings standing. I mean, this place.
What does that mean? How could you say Gaza is a small strip of land that is, there's no way where for people to go. Ukraine's a gigantic country with so spread out that the Russians just can't destroy everything if they wanted to. That's why when Trump says, oh, they could have destroyed Kiev, they've only used 20% of their power. Like he's talking like a DBZ fan or something. This is a loser. That's nonsense. It's because there's a gigantic country and it's not like Chechnya where they can just concentrate every explosive they have and drop it like on every building that's in existence. They can't just circle it and crush it. They tried at the start of the war and then they failed. That's what the initial invasion was. That's why they attacked Kiev. That's why they attacked from all sides at once.
You take a look at.
I mean, you look at some certain cities, and it's the case. Like Bakhmut, Mariupol took a horrible beating. Like, yeah, cities have been wiped off the face of the earth. The Russians use a horribly destructive war strategy. But the geography of Ukraine, compared to, for example, Chechnya, has in many ways saved it, which is why the Chechen leader of the resistance against the Russians at the time, during the fight against the Russian invasion, said that, it will be when the Ukrainians wake up that the Russian bear will fully be reckoned with, because it was only a nation with as populous or as big as Ukraine fighting against the Russian imperial center that could finally bring down the Russian imperial Ruski Mir, that continues to expand into Chechnya, into Georgia, into Moldova, Ukraine, etc. At least that was his pitch. And I mean, it's been a difficult last 3 years for the Russians.
Demolition of so many of those cities, and all those people are killed, never to come back again.
But Mr. President, that's all. That's Vladimir Putin's fault. Don't you agree?
I get tired of listening to it. I'll tell you what. I've seen it enough. And then he complains.
He's not even trying. He's like, isn't that Putin's fault? He's like, no, man. He's like, stop. I'm trashing Zelensky. Shut up. They can't salvage him if they wanted to. Remember, Putin has an 8% approval rating in the United States. This is not smart politics. This is bad politics. From a popularity, interacting with the public. It's either he literally got wooed by him, or there's some other purpose of he wants to build some order with the rest. It's what are the I can't think of, or he wants to cut some underhand tables. I have no clue. It's impossible for me to know for sure. But the reason why Brian Kilmeade is scrambling is because not only is this a question of American strategic interests, there's also a question of the fact that Putin's just a horrible monster. It's kind of impossible to cover it up, and the American public know it. And when he goes out of his way to not criticize him and call him a dictator, goes out of his way to not agree with Brian Kilmeade when he says stuff like this, but then goes out of his way to keep pivoting to kicking Zelensky, Like, that's a problem. But also, Brian Kilmeade set it up. Brian Kilmeade set it up by not at all defending the Ukrainian position in any way. He doesn't have enough of a spine in a room like this to give enough pushback to make Trump respect him. So it's just not going to happen. When I say respect him, I mean respect the question, which is why he can just barrel over it and pretend Brian Kilmeade didn't even ask him anything.
Trying to intermediate a peace. Well, he's been at meetings for 3 years with a president who didn't know what the hell he was doing. He's been in the meetings for 3 years, and nothing got done. So I don't think it's very important to be at meetings, to be honest.
What that doesn't mean, there was no meetings between the Ukrainians and the Russians in that time period. It was meetings between Ukrainians and allies in that time period. So what do you want me, like at the very start there were some meetings, but then the Russians were like, no, you're not allowed. I hate the Fox Autoplayer. It's so trash. It's so garbage. It's absolutely terrible. Fox takes it out once again. I don't know what he's talking about when it comes to these meetings. They haven't had one-on-one meetings with the Russians since the very start of the war. So the Ukrainians wanting to be at the table to assert their interests just makes sense. We all saw what happened to the Afghan national government. They don't want a repeat of that. They have no interest in that. And so, them wanting to be at the table is what 91% of Ukrainians want. And if you cannot respect what 91% of Ukrainians want, do you expect Zelensky to turn to his people and say, no? He has to live with those people. They live next to him. The country is for those people. He has to answer to them before he answers to an American president. Just no matter how much aid the American president gives. Zelensky's in an extremely difficult position between a man-child and a monster. Well, a monstrous man-child and a monstrous monster. Oh my God. What do you mean he's not? He hasn't achieved anything. Because he was invaded and the Russians haven't wanted to concede the fact that their original demands are preposterous.
And I've been watching him negotiate with no cards. He has no cards. And you get sick of it. You just get sick of it. And I've had it. And he then made a deal with us for rare earth and things. And who knows what rare earth is worth, but at least it's something. And who knows what it's worth. Who knows if they even have it. But we made a deal with rare earth, and Secretary of Treasury.
What does that mean? Did they fake it?
Treasury, a very good guy, actually went there.
We're go back. Let me skip
but look what you
Wasn't
have.
Arctic partnerships between Russia and the USA point in the Saudi meeting? That's an insane red flag when seen alongside Trump's Greenland and Canada talk prior his second win.
You have a man who's letting.
Yes, I could see him trying to cut deals in other areas, because I think Trump is between two people, and he's trying to. In his mind, is like, who can offer me something better? If the Russians offer me the Arctic, or part of the Arctic, maybe that's a better deal than what the Ukrainians could offer me and just some rare minerals. So for him, this deterrence doesn't the alliance structure. This stuff isn't coming into this calculation. It's just all, the maximalist art of the deal negotiating strategy. Like he's a real estate broker, not a leader of a country, a crooked one at that.
The most beautiful cities that they're demolished. Had the most beautiful domes. Those domes are the most beautiful.
But it's
in
all
the world.
Russia's. But that's Russia's fault, though, Mr. President. Russia
They're
did
all
the
demolished. 1,000-year-old domes, and everything's demolished. I mean, it's like a demolition site. It's sort of like Gaza. In fact, it's more. At least Gaza has a couple of buildings standing. I mean, this place. You take a look at the demolition of so many of those cities, and and all those people are killed. Never to come back again.
But, Mr. President, that's all. That's Vladimir Putin's fault. Don't you agree?
I get tired of listening to it. I'll tell you what. I've seen it enough. And then he complains that he's not at a meeting that we're having with Saudi Arabia trying to intermediate a peace. Well, he's been at meetings for 3 years with a very...
the Saudis wanted the Ukrainians there, by the way.
Didn't know what the hell he was doing. He's been at meetings for 3 years, and nothing got done. So I don't think it's very important to be at meetings.
You know what the Saudi logic was? How do you get peace with the Ukrainians if the Ukrainians aren't here? It's very basic logic.
Honest with you.
There's only one party that really benefits from the Ukrainians not being there. There's only one party in the whole world that benefits, and that is the Russians.
Hard to make deals, but look what's happened to his country. It's been demolished.
But no, I hear you.
He's gonna go back.
But Mr. President, but you know who's to blame for that.
If and when there's
but
peace,
don't you think it's Vladimir Putin that did the invasion unwarranted
Four
to try to
times.
take back land he had no right to?
Occurred is
And don't
occurred.
you think fundamentally that's that? And if you could just and now both sides want to talk, it seems. So we should
See,
just
the problem is values here. Brian Kilmeade here is trying to appeal to like a values, like their right to rule themselves matters. But Brian Kilmeade should know just from the last
get to that point.
the last segment they were doing, he doesn't think the Palestinians have a right to rule themselves in any way. Obviously, the circumstances between what started that war is a little different, but a right to rule themselves does not matter in Greenland, in Panama, in Canada, and anywhere it seems to Trump. Whether it's a negotiating tactic or not, like I think he's serious when it comes to at least the fact that if it crosses with his interests, he does not care.
They only want to talk because of me. If I wasn't involved, they wouldn't be talking to each other. And Russia would continue to, go through Ukraine because they are going through, Brian.
They aren't talking to each other. You're explicitly keeping them away from the table. You're talking to them.
Taking
What
a
the
lot of
Russians
land.
wanted from the start.
And Russia would continue the march through Ukraine. If it wasn't for me, they wouldn't be talking at all. I'm the only reason they're talking.
No, I think that everybody agrees with that. We have Macron coming to see you for France, and then Stormer for the UK this week to move forward.
Yeah, but they didn't do anything either. The war is going on. There no meetings with Russia, no nothing.
Right.
They haven't done anything. And Macron's a friend of mine.
tried
And
so
I've
much.
met with
Macron tried, I would even almost say too much at the start of the war. And they did these long phone calls that were never going to go anywhere because Putin had already made up his mind. Schultz had a phone call with Putin like a month ago.
Minister, and he's a very nice guy, but nobody's done anything. And I've been watching this go on for years, and I'm doing it for one reason. I hate the killing. I hate to see those young people killed. They're not Americans. They're Russians and Ukrainians. I hate to see the killing.
So I just saw the Polish president just tweeted, and he essentially told Zelensky to go back and do a deal with you and try to get to peace. And he just put that out a short while ago. So do you believe that the Russians want a deal? And even though they're the aggressors in this situation, they want a deal because they've had that 700,000 casualties. They're losing 46,000 a month too. So do you believe they were sincere in Saudi Arabia?
Look, Russia, and who is the Polish? Are you talking about Duda?
Yep.
Was it Duda that put it out?
Yes.
So oh God, I hate the autoplayer, so it's got to
because
we're
you
gonna
have
to go back.
different leaders in Poland for you.
1147. Yeah, he's different leaders in Poland. What he means is there's a prime minister and there's a president. If you're curious about what this tweet from Duda was, I do have it pulled up here somewhere. Here it is. A few minutes ago, President Zelensky called me. We had a candid conversation on the heels of our recent meetings with General Kellogg and other developments. I conveyed to him that we consistently believe there was no other way to stop the bloodshed and achieve lasting peace in Ukraine except with the support of the United States. For this reason, I suggested to President Zelensky to remain committed to the course of calm and constructive cooperation with the President Donald Trump. I trust that goodwill and honesty from the foundation of the U.S. negotiating strategy. Formed the foundation of the U.S. negotiating strategy. See, that right there, goodwill and honesty formed the foundation of the U.S. negotiating strategy. I don't believe there is a foundation for it. I believe it's completely on the fly. I don't believe this is a guy who's been in the gym practicing like his punches. I believe this is a guy who's going to go in there and he's going to start swinging and just see what happens. And somehow he ends up clocking his coach and his cut man. I have no doubt that President Trump is guided by a deep sense of responsibility for global stability and peace. Okay. So as Trump said, there are two leaders in Poland. There's a prime minister and there's a president. The prime minister is who holds the vast majority of the power. And that prime minister is Donald Tusk, who is from an opposing party from Duda, who's from the Law and Justice Party, because he is the president. So in large part, Tusk holds the vast majority of influence. Duda's role is in large part ceremonial, not completely ceremonial, but in large part ceremonial. And so statements like this end up not really mattering outside of what we're seeing right now, the fact that other people can pick it up and use it as, aha, see, the Poles are with us. The Ukrainians are being silly. And the Law and Justice Party are the ones that are definitely more testy with the Ukrainians. In fact, the Law and Justice Party candidate to replace Duda for the election this year is even worse than Duda. He's somebody who's questioned not only Ukrainian membership in NATO, but even Ukrainian NATO membership in the EU, which was what the Euromaidan, getting them on that pathway was in large part about, was this European integration. So there's a question of, even from the Law and Justice Party, if Ukraine is within the European community, while Donald Trump wants the Europeans to take the responsibility of putting, Ukrainian defense on their shoulders, while propping up the people who are least likely to do that. It's a strategy that is almost designed to fail. And that's because he's shooting from the hip. Back to where we were.
Interesting. But no, look, are you ready? Russia did not attack during my administration, but I will say he hates Zelensky. He hates him.
I'm sorry. I'm actually sick of hearing this, to the point that I'm going to be a nitpicker and say they did. They attacked in 2017 in Avdiivka. It wasn't to the size or scale. It wasn't an international news headline, so it doesn't matter to everybody else, but it mattered to the city of Avdiivka. There were attacks. It was a semi-frozen conflict. It's just that the conflict spiraled to a large-scale, full-scale war under the Biden administration after 3 terms of failed Ukraine policy.
And dispassion. You're lucky you don't hate people, Brian. You don't hate anybody. You've never.
But it's mutual.
Never been a hater.
I'll give you the exact read. He said, "I suggest that President Zelensky remain committed to the course of calm, constructive cooperation with Donald Trump. I trust that goodwill and honesty form a foundation of the U.S. negotiation strategy. I have no doubt that President Trump is guided by a deep sense of responsibility for global stability and peace." And he said he just spoke to Zelensky. So are you expecting a call would you accept a call from Zelensky today?
Yeah, of course. I'm not playing games. I don't accept or not accept calls. Of course I'll take a call from him. But he's been negotiating for 3 years. And just so you know, when you say Russia was the attacker,
they've been fighting. They've literally not been negotiating for 3 years. They negotiated at the start, and then since then they've been fighting for 3 years. This is a misnomer.
Russia attacked, but there was no reason for them to attack. You could have talked him out. There was no reason that he should have attacked. That whole thing was going on for years. There was no reason he was going in. It should have.
What do you
never
mean?
happened.
There's no reason. He gave a speech where he highlighted all of his reasons, including the fact of Russian imperial clay. There was no reasons. It's like he didn't even. Has he talked to Putin? Has he given his Reddit speech about Yaroslav's horse taking a dump in Kiev? I don't know. But there were reasons. There were reasons during your term. That's why there was still a frozen conflict during your term.
Or should have never happened. And I'm telling you, the way they talked, I said, these guys are going to go into a war. Every time I say, oh, it's not Russia's fault, I always get slammed by the fake news. But I'm telling you, Biden said the wrong things.
So it's Biden and Ukraine's fault. These are the people he's blamed in the last week. Biden and Zelensky is the people he's referenced as starting the war. How much blame has he laid at Putin in the last week that you guys can remember? I'm sure when put in the corner once in a while, said, yeah, they shouldn't have started the war. But at the start of the war, remember, his first thing he reveled in was the genius of the invasion, man. That was his inclination, the first thing to do.
Zelensky said the wrong things. They got attacked.
What wrong things did he say? It was Zelensky said the word attack. What was it? You can't just be vague about this, because I'll just believe he's lying, because he probably is.
Act by somebody that's much bigger and much stronger, which is a bad thing to do, and you don't do that. But Russia could have been talked out of that so easily. That should never have been a war. And all those dead people shouldn't be dead, and all those cities.
The idea that Russia could have been talked out of it easily is just bullshit. Macron tried for days and days and days, endless phone calls with Putin, didn't do anything. There was tons of talking, didn't do anything. He had already made up his mind at a certain point. Whether or not, if it would have been different if Trump was in office, is impossible to know. But I find it highly doubtful. He hasn't ever made a good argument for this outside of the idea that he's tough. But considering how he's approaching negotiations, it doesn't look that way.
Shouldn't be demolished right now. So when Zelensky said, he wasn't invited to a meeting, I mean, it wasn't a priority because he did such a bad job in negotiating so far. Number one, you shouldn't have had a war. And if you did, it should have been solved and settled immediately. It could have been.
He says it could have been. The only deal that was offered included the not only occupation of Ukrainian lands and a guarantee of no NATO membership and the giving up of all this leverage and all these concessions, but also like demilitarization, which would have made it easier to invade Ukraine than it was this time by cutting their military basically 1/5, making basically nothing, so they could just roll over it and conquer Ukraine if they ever felt like it. I mean, is that the deal they should have accepted, or would Trump have somehow used his negotiation magic to create better terms?
Mr. President, I think you're 100% right. There's two things.
3 years ago,
Zelensky made two mistakes in 3 days. He criticized you, and then he criticized...
He criticized you! Wah! Fucking suck it up. Tug on your nuts. Fuck, I'm a loser. I mean, I criticize you! Fucking loser network. Fake journalists. Simps, brown nosers. Get the smell of his asshole off your tongue. Jesus Christ.
As the meeting, and then he said, I'm walking away from the deal, which was, I think, 55% of their rare earth minerals.
50?
It would have allowed...
Oh, that was wrong for him to be like, hey, it's wrong for the art of the deal guy, okay, for him to say, maybe I should, the guy who says maximum demands right at the start. He says that openly in his book. Maximum demands. Demand everything you possibly can. And it's bad for him to be like, maybe I should wait for better terms. Maybe I should ask for better terms than selling out all the resources I need to rebuild my country that's been decimated, as Trump so brutally described. It's like you want the country to be unstable after the war. Of course he's going to reject. What do you mean? He should just accept it? Yeah, own all of our resources. Own everything in Ukraine. Own everything? And you don't even need to give us new weapons. Just to settle the debts of the old weapons. I think $500 billion for $100 billion somehow seems fair. Including port infrastructure, and there's not even just the resources. I'm not even talking about, he wanted ports. He wanted commercial ports. He wanted the rights. Like, this is, yes, for quite a lot. And the idea that the Ukrainians should have just accepted that right off the bat with no reservations. I mean, you view them in a colonial fashion.
America to have a stake there, and nobody would attack Ukraine if America had business there. Having said that, I think if both sides could, do you think the Russians should be celebrating right now because they hear the rhetoric coming from the White House?
No, because if I got out, I think they really want to make a deal. I do. They found it impossible to make a deal.
So why shouldn't they be celebrating?
As his buildings came down. You know,
that
the buildings came down all over. They were just raining down. You got nothing.
Down.
You know, take a look at what he's going to. Let's assume I make a deal. I'm getting him back many demolished cities and the bodies of many dead people. What kind of a deal is that? What kind of a situation is that? There was no reason for that.
No, I hear you.
Russia attacked, but they shouldn't have let him attack because they wouldn't have attacked.
Immediately is like, he slides almost into Russia critique. Now, Russia attacked, but you shouldn't have let them.
If you had people that knew what they were doing.
To respect Brian
Joe Biden is a very dumb man. You know that, and I know it. Joe Biden is a very dumb man who was dumber than ever before because, you know, things have happened to him. He had no idea what he was doing, and everything he said was wrong. And I said, you know what? I think this guy's going to cause I think he's going to cause a war. Right. And that's what happened. And I will tell you, Putin could have been talked out of that so easy, but
He said that it was genius that he invaded. If it was genius, which is what he said at the start of the war, why wouldn't he have done it? Before it turned into a massive clusterfuck disaster, Trump thought it was genius, just like he supported the Iraq invasion at the start until it became a mess. Just because Trump's like pretending like he was this peace activist after the fact, look at his inclinations towards Panama. Look at his inclinations toward Greenland. Look at his inclinations towards all these countries. Now he's going to certify all these cartels as terror groups so he can do drones. Like, his first inclination is not like, oh, like, let's not overextend ourselves. Like, no, his first inclination was, oh, that's genius of the Russians. So if he thinks it's genius, how could he have negotiated them out of it if he thought it was a good idea? Or at least he thought it was genius from their perspective.
They didn't know how to talk.
So, Mr.
He would have
President,
been talked out of that war so easy.
you
But
have
they didn't know how to talk.
right, but
they
you-
said all the wrong things, and I'm not.
It was like a dialogue tree, you know, like at the end of Fallout New
try-
Vegas, you could talk to Legat and the Linus, and you can, like, if you have 100 speech, you can make them go away, and the Kingdom Come Deliverance of the speech. It's like a speech check. If Biden failed the speech check because he talked about his ice cream and the war started.
To make Putin like nicer or better. I'm just telling you the fact that war should have never happened.
we just
Putin would have
talked
never
harder.
gone in.
and we'll see where we go from here. But Mr. President, you have us.
Notice how he never ever describes how he would have avoided the war. Like, this is what we would have demanded. This is what we would have. This is what we would have said. He just says that we would have. He would have negotiated. It would have been so easy. Just like he said it was so easy to end the war in 24 hours. It's been like 1,000. One last thing I want to show you is not every single Republican in the party is just going with this lockstep. The Senate Majority Leader, Tills, has made the speech on the House floor going after Putin and his crimes. And I wanted to show you guys quickly this and then tell you why it feels like, at the moment, like it doesn't matter.
I support President Trump, and I believe that most of his policies on national security are right. I believe his instincts are pretty good. But what I'm telling you, whoever believes that there is any space for Vladimir Putin in the future of a stable globe better go to Ukraine. They better go to Europe. They better invest the time to understand that this man is a cancer and the greatest threat to democracy in my lifetime. And it will be a cancer that spreads into the South China Sea, into Taiwan, and metastasize across the globe. So, ladies and gentlemen, when I tell you that Vladimir Putin is a liar, a murderer, and a man responsible for ordering the systematic torture, kidnapping, and rape of innocent civilians, believe me, because the evidence is mile high.
And then he'll go and he'll vote for Tulsi Gabbard. He'll go and he'll vote for RFK. And he'll go and vote for these people who are going to advise him to concede and appeal to these people. And until you take legislative action over, say, power of the purse authority, or move to make sure that he sends the last of the $3.8 billion in presidential drawdown, like you asked the president to do that as a goodwill gesture to favor negotiation or something. You do something, anything. You just let Trump just run roughshod over American foreign policy in this way, and all you have are these like pretty speeches about, oh, aren't the Russians mean? When you're the Senate Majority Leader, you're the people who are confirming his picks. Why not let go to be like, why not work? Be like, President, you need to work with us on this foreign policy issue for us to, confirm these picks. It's too late. You already gave up all that leverage. But he needs to do something, or all this is just pretty words. And so far, I'm expecting nothing. My goodness. Imagine being Keith Kellogg, by the way. Imagine being in his shoes. Rare Microsoft browser victory. Actually.